We're ready whenever you are.
Okay.
I'm going to mute myself. There you go.
Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to our quick Pressbook and H5P Studio training. I'm Rama, and I'm the Open Library Coordinator at eCampusOntario, and I'll be covering the first part of our presentation today.
Hi, and I'm Andrea, Virtual Lab Development and Open Education Assistant with Online Learning Strategies at U of T. I'll be covering the H5P Studio part of this presentation.
Okay, so today in our short time, we'll be, there's a lot to learn about Pressbook and H5P, but today we'll just give you a quick high-level overview of Pressbook and eCampusOntario H5P Studio. You'll learn how to create a Pressbook account, see example of how Pressbook is used. You'll see example of how H5P content is used to create interactivity, and also learn where to find more information. So we'll leave you with some links and a little bit of resource. Okay, so as part of our member institutions, you have access to both Pressbooks and H5P Studio for free. This allows you to create and customize resources and interactive activities for your teaching. So within Pressbook, there are two main there's two main reasons why we offer Pressbook. Not only is it easy to use, especially if you've ever used WordPress, because Pressbook is built on WordPress, but mainly because Pressbook is a write once, publish many platform. This means that you can create multiple platforms from bound and printed textbooks to just ebooks, or to ebooks by just creating one book. Pressbook also offers the best of digital and physical. This means that you can turn a book from a flat PDF into an interactive teaching tool. So you can embed video, add interactive content like H5P, and even allow students to annotate and interact with the text by enabling hypothesis without affecting the print PDF version. So these are just two main top level reasons why we like Pressbook. And so what can you do in Pressbook? So essentially you can create, collaborate, and share. So those three main philosophy essentially just means that you can create any type of book or open educational resources in Pressbook. A book can be any type of resource. So this could be a syllabus, framework, it could be a simulation game. So we've seen it all and we have it all. So the three book cover image that I have are example of different types of resources that were created using Pressbook. So the first one, we have somewhat of a traditional textbook that also has a print-on-demand version that's offered. The second one is an interactive, it's a textbook, but it has over 150 H5P activities. And the last one is a simulation game. So again, you can pretty much create a wide range of different type of resources for your need. You can collaborate with colleagues and anyone else on our network. And this actually includes educators from across Ontario. So building a medical terminology foundation, so the middle cover image is an example of what we call a multi-institutional collaboration. So you have about, I think, over 5 different folks from from 5 different institutions actually collaborated together to create this one book. You can also export your book into many formats. So as I mentioned, such as the printed version for the first one, or you can share the webbook link with colleagues and students. So I'm going fast because we only have a short time, but I promise we have a handout to give out toward the end, and we're more than happy to hang around if time permits to answer questions. So I encourage you to check out the 3 examples in the previous slides and others, and you can do that by going to the Open Library website and clicking on the search button, and that would take you to our catalog where you can view different examples. And in celebration of Open Education Week, you can also check out our resource of the day on Twitter at Open Library ON to see the different kind of open resources created by other Ontarian educators. So each Pressbook instance is a centrally managed network of individual books. This just means that our network is available at eCampusOntario.pressbook.pub. So anything that you create will actually be hosted and live on this network. This is also where you can create and sign into your account. So because U of T have actually enabled single sign-on, this means that you can instantly create your account by logging in with your university's credential. So that makes the registration process a lot easier. So once you're logged in, you can click on the amend feature on the upper right-hand corner, and this will take you into your account. So depending on how you create your account, so meaning you can be invited into Pressbook and be added to a book, so or you can create it on your own. So depending on which method you create your account, you will see two different type of interface, but the interface are really an interface with that, a user who has a book and a user who doesn't have a book. So once you create a book, you'll see on the right-hand side, you'll have a lot more options in terms of the different menu options and what you can do. And in a short, simple term, there are three ways to create in Pressbook. So you can either create a new book from scratch, or you can clone a book. And clone a book essentially just means you are adapting, remixing, or deriving from an openly licensed book that allows for derivative format. And you can use a URL in a Pressbook network to do so, or you can import a book. So if you have something that you've been working on a Word document, or something that you've been working on in your LMS system, you can actually import that into Pressbook. It will accept EPUBs, Word document, XML, or URLs as an import format. You can also import different sections from different open resource textbook to create one type of resource. So the building medical terminology is actually also another example of a book that's been adapted. So once you create your book, you will have what we call a web book, which is actually your homepage or your landing page. You'll see that you have the book title, author, a brief summary, licenses information, and any format that you've made available for the book will be in the download feature on the right over here. So when users come and click on this, they'll be able to see all the different formats that you've made available. There's also more metadata information that you can provide about your book at the bottom of the page. So once you've created your book, you can do different things to enhance your book. And this really just means taking your book from just a simple text into a textbook, or even making it an interactive web book. And some of these features can be adding images or embedding videos from YouTube, or also if you have your own institutional media player, you can actually embed videos from there as well. You can include text boxes to highlight learning objective. So things like key takeaways or example. You can also add a glossary and footnote. You can even add two different mathematical equations if you are working on a textbook or a book that needs to, you need to add math equations. And of course, you can make it interactive by adding H5P, which Andrea will talk more about later. And you could also embed hypotheses, which allow for live web annotation. And before we get more into more detail before we talk more about H5P, once you're done creating and formatting and enhancing your book, this is where you can sort of select what kind of formats you want to make available for your book. So Pressbook has over 11 different type of export formats, and the difference really between the supported format and unsupported and other format, it just means that supported has been tested and we know that they work 100% across those different platforms or format. The other formats just means that they sometimes work and sometimes you may have to tweak them depending on what kind of customizations you've made in your book. And of course, you can share your files with colleagues, students. You can share it with the open library by looking to our submission criteria. You can also do a print on demand version, so you can provide a printed version for those who prefer to have a paper copy. And you can also include in Pressbook directory and other open repository. Okay, and that's it for my section. So I'll pass it over to Andrea.
Thank you, Rama. So you're driving it. So next slide, please. So H5P is the abbreviation for HTML5 package, and it's an open source e-learning authoring tool that enables educators to create and edit interactive content like videos, quizzes, games, presentations, and more. There are over 40 interactive content types. And once created, this interactive content may be linked to from a website or web resource embedded into a Quarkus course and incorporated into Pressbooks. It was developed by a team at Wilfrid Laurier University Library. You go one more up, sorry, Rama. Oh, and one down. Thank you. And the eCampusOntario H5P Studio provides a one-stop shop for eCampusOntario member institutions who want to create interactive content for their courses or other instructional projects. And to access the eCampusOntario H5P Studio, you go to h5pstudio.ecampusontario.ca. And this is where you can view the catalog of H5P content without even having an account or registering. You can view content that has been created and shared openly by educators across Ontario. And to register for your very own free account with a member institution email, of course, click on register. That's marked at the top right there. And this takes you to a form to fill in. Remember to use your U of T information, and then you can get started with playing with the many interactive content types available. Next slide, please. To explore the eCampusOntario H5P Studio, you can use the search panel on the left of the catalog screen as highlighted in the slide. You can search the catalog by title and description, by content type, keyword, subject, author, and even license type. You can simply explore content others have created to give you ideas of what you might want to create, but you can also choose to use content you find as is or modify it to suit your own teaching needs as long as it has the right license type for you to do so, of course. You can also create new H5P modules from scratch. And then you have the option to share your creations with students on your profile in the eCampusOntario H5P Studio catalog and in your Pressbooks project. Next slide. Here's an example of some H5P content, a drag and drop content type that I chose to reuse to create a similar exercise. So in this case, I clicked on reuse, which you would find underneath the H5P content, and then on copy content. And then I clicked on create in the upper menu on the right. And then next slide. Then I clicked on paste in the upper right area circled in the slide before saving the new H5P content. And of course, you have to fill in the description area on the left. So descriptive title and subject specifically, as these are mandatory fields indicated by the red asterisks. And next slide, please. So this is my creation. I adapted the label the heart drag and drop exercise to create the label the coronavirus exercise by replacing the image, changing the label elements to match the new fields I created. And the next slide. So by the way, when you're creating your interactive content in the eCampusOntario H5P Studio, you will find links to tutorials and to examples, which are very helpful when you're just starting to explore. Yeah, next slide. And once you've created your H5P interactive content, like this, label the coronavirus example, if you're ready to use it in a Pressbooks project, you would choose reuse and then download as H5P file option instead of copy content. Okay, next slide. So now if we go back to Pressbooks, you in your project, you would have to activate the H5P plugin before you can use any of the content that you've created. So we're gonna demonstrate how that's done. So next slide. So then you have the option to create H5P content right in Pressbooks once that plugin is activated, or upload something you've already created. Like, you download that H5P file, and then you could choose to add new, upload, and then select content type to upload. Please keep in mind that if you just want to create H5P content, do so in the eCampusOntario H5P Studio and not directly in Pressbooks. Only use the H5P plugin in Pressbooks if you're actually creating a resource where you want to incorporate interactive activities into your webbook. Okay, next slide, please. So once your H5P content has been imported into the H5P plugin in your Pressbooks project and saved, don't forget to save, then it's ready to be used. You may choose to copy the shortcode that's there on the right and paste it into the chapter you want this in, or in the next slide, in the Pressbooks editor of the chapter you want to add this interactive content, you would click on Add H5P, then choose the H5P content from the handy dandy list that pops up, and then click Insert, and it will insert the shortcode for you. And the next slide. And this is what my Label the Coronavirus looks like in my webbook. Next slide. So here it is. Here's the webbook that I created to highlight some examples of H5P interactive content. It's still a work in progress and kind of set to private and all rights reserved for now. But if you want to reuse it, if you want to, explore it, go right ahead. The cover's pretty rough too. I'm sharing it with you to showcase what can be done with H5P and Pressbooks and to hopefully spark some ideas in you. And the example of drag and drop is there, along with a direct link to the file in eCampusOntario H5P Studio, which was also shared by Rama in the chat. So you can reuse it and adapt it for yourself if you like. It also includes other examples and links. And next slide, please. For more details on how to get started with Pressbooks, here is a really cool Pressbooks user guide created in Pressbooks by Pressbooks themselves. And the link is in the chat as well. And next slide. And then for more details on H5P, I'll refer you to a blog post on the onlinelearning.utoronto.ca site, where I've covered a lot of this in a bit more detail. And that link is in the chat as well. And next slide. So there you have it. This concludes our speedy intro. As you can see, there is a lot you can do with Pressbooks and H5P content. And these are the resources that were shared in the chat. We also have the PDF of the slides that we forwarded to Sarah. Hopefully she can share those with you. And also a handout with, I think all the links are in the handout as well. So there's lots of resources for you to explore. And now with the next slide, we're open to any questions that you have for us.
Thank you, Rama and Andrea. You can either put your questions in the chat or unmute yourself, unvideo yourself, and share.
As a question from Jit, he assumes that one would attribute sources when using images and so on. Yes, yes, you would. There's also, when you're creating H5P content and you're inputting images, there's a way to put in the metadata for all those images as well. It's not a citation tool per se. Rama, do you have any more comments on that?
No, it's not a citation tool per se, but all of the image interface has enough metadata field where you can actually input in every single, I guess, element that you need to include. So I know that in Pressbook and H5P Studio, there is very extent. So it allows you to actually add and link to Creative Commons license if you're using an image that's CC license. So it'll actually not only input in the type of license, but it'll also link back to CC Commons as per their instructions, right? You can add alt text to the images. It allows you to add any caption that you want to add to the image. So the actual metadata element field is vast and extend enough that it will capture all of the usual details that need to be captured for any image or video.
And if you go to the direct H5P Studio links for the content types that that I created that are in the handout and stuff, you will see, if you explore in there, that I've filled in all of those metadata fields. Forget where it is exactly, but
yeah, so at the bottom of every H5P content, for example, there is a reuse icon, but there's also rights of use icon. So if you click on that rights of use, that will actually tell you what the license is for the metadata, sorry, for the H5P content, but not only the H5P content, it will also tell you the license for all the images that were used within the H5P content as well. But that's the onus, again, is on the creator to make sure that they're filling in all of the metadata field for the images that they're using, and to make sure that they're properly sourcing and linking back to those images.
I was going to say as well, if you join room 1, Permjeet, we can show you an example of how you can see that information for each image, or I can show you my backend for my module and how I've entered in the metadata for images.
Yes, there is a license field in the metadata, and that's I know, like, I find in H5P Studio per se, not everyone necessarily always make use of the metadata field in terms of actually applying a type of license to their work. So we have sort of like an undisclosed version that oftentimes folks will actually leave that. So what we always recommend is, if you are wanting to reuse a H5P content that has a license that's not explicit, you can contact and message the creator, so that you can contact and message the user to find out if you can use it. Because sometimes I think it's just people do forget, or they just don't know where it is. And it is a resource that I'm working on creating, is how to actually remember to apply a type of license to your work. I say generally 80% of the time people are creating to share. It's just a matter of either they forgot or they don't know enough about Creative Commons license to actually apply to it. But we always encourage to reach out either to us or to the creator if you do want to use any H5P content that you find there before using it, of course.
Rama, I had a question about that actually. So this came up in our room 1. So there was an example we were looking at, and it didn't look like that module had a license. And so I think Fiona mentioned that there was a note on the studio, eCampusOntario Studio, that anything that's created there that isn't clear what the license is has a CC BY SA. Is that true then? That they, just that license?
I just unmuted myself. I wouldn't say per se. So I don't know which note she's talking about, but I will definitely take a look at it to make sure that, because I know that we made a change of actually increasing and updating all of the different license type of element, right? So that folks can actually select the license that they want. But the U, which is like undisclosed, is, or unlicensed or undisclosed, it's still, I honestly still can't remember what the U stands for. So I have to double check.
I think it's undisclosed.
Yeah, undisclosed. So that just means that the person hasn't actually applied a license to it, but it actually doesn't mean that it is open to be used. It's not CC BY, because we do have CC BY. And it is something that we're working on clarifying. And I think that's where the resource I'm creating is going to help actually explain what the different type of license mean and how to apply a license to your work. Because yeah, no, the U is just because it's honestly, I think, one, folks just don't know where the metadata button is. Two, they're in a rush, they're just creating for their course. They've published it quickly and they just forgot to actually go back to add a license. Because oftentimes I will have people who message and say, oh, I totally forgot to add a license. Where do I add it? So it is one of those like unintentional thing that usually just happen quick. But I always say, always reach out before using anything that doesn't have an explicit license on it that allows for reuse, adaptation, or remix.
So Fiona just added the link to where that note is. Yeah. Thanks. Any other questions, comments, reactions? So many great tools. And we were also saying in room 1 that there's, I think Rama was saying there's like 10,000 users plus. And then how many
10,000 creation.
That's it. That's
yeah.
okay, that much.
That's a lot. That would be amazing. No, I think we have close to 3,000 users and over 10,000 H5P content. And I think the content is more than that, because I know that the last workshop I was doing at H5P, I actually do have a slide on like current usage. And that was a while back, so I haven't checked it in some time, but I would definitely check it. And also like the content type itself, not all content are actually in the catalog, right? So sometimes people will create content and they don't make it available in the catalog. So they're just creating for their course and it's just specifically for their course. So we do have a lot of content that aren't actually in the catalog because the creator has decided to exclude it from the catalog. So that's something that you won't necessarily see when you look at the catalog.
That's right. Thanks. Any other questions? Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I would definitely work on clarifying that message because it does say everything is, but at the same time, is the you. I know we had discussion about that before because it is confusing to people. So I'll make sure that we have sort of like a on the about page. I'm working on the guidebook, and that guidebook will actually be able to say U stands for this, and that means X, Y, Z. So that way, it can clear up that confusion.
There's a question from Permjeet. Do you track student usage or can you?
So we don't track student usage per se. Generally, what tends to happen is that if, let's say, if a prof decides to create H5P content for their course or as part of their resource, and if they want to be able to track students actually taking the interactive activity or going through the quiz, then the students can sign up and get an account. And then if they take the quiz, then on their dashboard, they'll be able to actually get content results. So that's one way of sort of tracking students actually participating or taking part of your H5P content. The other thing is sometimes we'll have where if the students don't want to create an account, they can take the quiz, do a screenshot, and send it to the prof. So we don't necessarily track just because there's so much activity that happens there. And sometimes what we actually get is because the H5P content, like it's not for cumulative assessment, right? Because if any student knows HTML, they'll be able to actually see the answer. So it's not the best way to actually test and keep track, but it's a great tool for participation mark or summative marks grading. So, but sometimes what we find is people will use our H5P Studio because we have 40 plus more content to create H5P content, which they will upload into their own learning management system. And then they use it there to actually track and grade student based there. So there's different ways of using it and how, people use it. And it really just depends on what ultimately you're trying to get out of it. I hope that answers your question.
I think that's a really interesting point, Rama, that you can integrate it into your course LMS, Quarkus, or whatever it is, and then that's where you can track student usage. So that's a good point. Okay. Well, if you have any questions for Rama or Andrea, I'm sure you can reach them. We'll share their slides afterwards. And I'm just going to go back to sharing my screen.